At a naval base ceremony, an admiral casually asks a grizzled veteran for his old call sign, expecting a routine answer. When the man replies Ghost 5, the admiral's face drains of color, haunted by a classified mission few survived and fewer still speak of. The naval base at Norfolk was bustling with activity as preparations for the annual veterans ceremony reached their peak. Among the crowd was retired Chief Petty Officer Daniel "Danny" Sullivan, a 67-year-old man with weathered hands and a quiet demeanor that belied his storied past. His gray hair was cropped short, his posture still rigid from decades of discipline. Danny had served 30 years in the Navy, most of it in special operations. And though he rarely spoke of it, his service record was the stuff of legend among those who knew where to look. Admiral James Whitaker, a decorated officer in his early 50s, was the keynote speaker for the event. Whitaker was known for his charisma and his ability to connect with veterans, often sharing stories of his own deployments to put them at ease. As he mingled with the attendees before the ceremony, his eyes landed on Danny, who stood alone near a display of naval memorabilia. Something about the older man's presence, quiet, unassuming, yet commanding, caught Whitaker's attention. He approached, extending a hand. "Admiral James Whitaker," he said, his voice warm but authoritative. "I don't believe we've met. You serve, I take it?" Danny nodded, shaking the admiral's hand with a grip that surprised Whitaker with its strength. "Daniel Sullivan, sir, retired Chief Petty Officer. Served from 75 to 05. Whitaker smiled, sensing there was more to the man than his modest introduction suggested. 30 years? That's a hell of a run. What was your call sign back in the day? I'm always curious about the old-timers." Danny's eyes flickered, just for a moment, before he answered. "Ghost 5, sir." The admiral's smile froze. His face paled, and for a brief second, he seemed to forget where he was. The name Ghost 5 hit him like a shockwave, stirring memories of classified briefings and whispered rumors from his early days in naval intelligence. He recovered quickly, forcing a chuckle. "Ghost 5, huh? That's quite a call sign. Care to share how you earned it?" Danny's expression remained neutral, but his voice carried a weight that made the air feel heavier. "Just a nickname from a mission, sir. Nothing special." He didn't elaborate, and Whitaker didn't press, at least not then. But the admiral's reaction hadn't gone unnoticed. A few nearby veterans exchanged glances, sensing something unspoken. Danny Sullivan's military career had begun in 1975, when he enlisted at 17, fresh out of a rough Chicago neighborhood. He'd excelled in basic training, his natural athleticism and sharp instincts catching the eye of recruiters for naval special warfare. By 1980, he was a SEAL, deployed on missions that took him from the jungles of Central America to the deserts of the Middle East. His call sign, Ghost 5, came from a covert operation in 1983, one that remained classified, even to men like Whitaker. The operation, codenamed Black Veil, was a joint mission with Allied forces to neutralize a terrorist cell in a volatile region. Danny's team, a 5-man unit, was tasked with infiltrating a heavily guarded compound to extract a high-value target. The mission went south when their exfiltration route was compromised, for the 5 men didn't make it out. Danny, the 5th, completed the mission alone, dragging the target through 20 miles of hostile territory to a rendezvous point. He earned a Navy Cross for it, but the details were buried in a file few had clearance to read. To those who knew, Ghost 5 wasn't just a call sign. It was a legend. Whitaker, still rattled, excused himself to prepare for his speech, but his mind was elsewhere. He'd heard of Black Veil during his time in intelligence, back when he was a young officer sifting through after-action reports. The mission was a ghost story of its own, a cautionary tale about the cost of covert ops. Only one man had walked away, and his call sign was etched into the reports. Ghost 5. Whitaker had assumed the man was long dead or lost to obscurity. Yet here he was, standing in Norfolk, looking like any other retiree. During the ceremony, Whitaker delivered a speech with his usual polish, but his eyes kept drifting to Danny, who sat in the 3rd row, hands folded, listening quietly. The admiral spoke of sacrifice of the Navy's legacy, but his words felt hollow to him now. He couldn't shake the image of that classified file, the redacted pages detailing a mission so brutal it had been scrubbed from official records. After the ceremony, he sought Danny out again, determined to learn more. "Chief Sullivan," Whitaker said, catching him near the exit. "That call's sign of yours. It rings a bell. Mind if we talk privately?" Danny hesitated, then nodded. They stepped into a quiet office off the main hall, away from the crowd. Whitaker closed the door and leaned against the desk, his tone less formal now. "Ghost 5, I've read about you. Black Veil, 83. That was you, wasn't it?" Danny's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. "You've got a good memory, sir. Most don't know that name." Whitaker exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I was in intelligence back then, just a lieutenant. I saw the reports. One man, 20 miles, against all odds. You're a damn hero, Sullivan. Why don't you talk about it?" Danny's eyes met Whitaker's, steady and unyielding. "Because it's not a story worth telling, sir. 4 good men died. I just got lucky." Whitaker shook his head, unconvinced. "Luck doesn't carry a man through that. I've read enough to know you didn't just survive. You won. That target you extracted changed the course of things. You know that." Danny shrugged, his voice low. "I did my job. That's all." But Whitaker wasn't ready to let it go. Over the next few weeks, he found himself digging into Danny's past, pulling strings to access old records. He learned that Black Veil wasn't Danny's only mission. There were others, dozens in fact, each marked by the same quiet competence. A hostage rescue in 87, a sabotage op in 91, a counterintelligence mission in 98 that earned him a second commendation. Danny had been everywhere, done everything, and yet he'd retired to a modest house in Virginia, living on a pension and volunteering at a local veteran center. Whitaker invited Danny to a private dinner at the officers' club, hoping to draw him out. Over steaks and whiskey, the Admiral tried again. "You're a mystery, Sullivan. Most guys with your record would be shouting it from the rooftops. Why the silence?" Danny took a sip of his drink, his eyes distant. "Because the job wasn't about me. It was about the mission, the team, the ones who didn't come back. They're the ones who matter. I'm just the guy who got old." Whitaker leaned forward, his voice earnest. "You're more than that. Men like you built what we have today. The Navy could use your story, recruitment morale. Hell, you could teach at Annapolis." Danny shook his head. "I'm no teacher, sir, and I'm no hero. I just did what I was trained to do." But the truth was more complex. Danny carried the weight of those missions, the faces of the men he'd lost, the decisions he'd made. Black Veil haunted him most. He remembered the moment he realized his team was gone, the silence of the comms, the blood on his hands as he carried the target to safety. He buried it all when he retired, focusing on a quiet life, helping younger veterans find their way. But Whitaker's questions were stirring things he'd rather leave buried. Word of Danny's passed again to spread, despite his efforts to keep it quiet. A junior officer who'd overheard Whitaker's conversation with Danny mentioned Ghost 5 to a colleague, and soon the name was circulating among the base's younger sailors. They approached Danny with a mix of awe and curiosity, asking for stories he didn't want to tell. He deflected them with humor or silence, but the attention was relentless. One day, a young SEAL, Lieutenant Marcus Reed, tracked Danny down at the Veteran Center. Reed was preparing for a high-stakes mission and had heard whispers of Ghost 5's exploits. "I need to know how you did it," Reed said, his voice urgent. "Black Veil. How did you keep going when it all went to hell?" Danny studied the younger man, seeing the same fire he'd once had. He sighed, setting aside the paperwork he'd been sorting. "You don't want to know how I did it, Lieutenant. You want to know why. And the why is simple. You don't get to quit. Not when lives are on the line. You move, you fight, you survive. That's it." Reed pressed for details, but Danny shook his head. "Focus on your team, son. That's what matters, not the stories." Whitaker, meanwhile, was pushing for Danny to receive formal recognition. He submitted a request to the Navy to honor Sullivan at the next major ceremony, citing his extraordinary service. The request was approved, and Danny was invited to accept a Distinguished Service Award. He declined, politely but firmly. "I don't need medals, sir," he told Whitaker over the phone. "I've got enough." But Whitaker was persistent. He showed up at Danny's house one evening, unannounced, with a folder of declassified documents from Blackvale. "I thought you should see this," Whitaker said, handing him a file. "It's not just about you. It's about what you did for the country." Danny took the folder, but didn't open it. "I know what I did, Admiral. I don't need to read about it." Whitaker sat across from him, his tone softer now. "I get it, Sullivan. You don't want the spotlight. But people need to know what men like you went through. Not for glory, for understanding. The cost of it all." Danny looked at the folder, then at Whitaker. For the first time, he spoke about Blackvale, not the mission but the men. His team leader, who'd taken a bullet to save him. The radio man, who'd cracked a joke even as he bled out. The sniper, who'd cover their flank until the end. "They were the heroes," Danny said. "I just carried the weight." Whitaker listened, his respect deepening. He realized Danny wasn't hiding from his past. He was protecting it, keeping it sacred. The Admiral made a decision then. He withdrew the nomination for the award, respecting Danny's wishes. But he asked for one thing in return, a chance to record Danny's story anonymously for the Navy's archives. Not for glory, but for history. Danny agreed on the condition that his name and call sign be left out. Over the next month, he met with a naval historian, sharing fragments of his career, not just Blackvale, but the missions that shaped him. He spoke of the camaraderie, the fear, the moment of clarity in chaos. The historian listened, transcribing a story that would be preserved for future generations, without ever mentioning Ghost 5. Whitaker never forgot their conversations. He carried Danny's story with him, a reminder of the quiet strength that defined the Navy's best. Danny, meanwhile, returned to his routine, helping veterans, tending his garden, living as he always had, out of the spotlight, but never out of purpose. Ghost 5 remained a whisper, a name that stirred awe and unease, a testament to a man who'd faced the worst and walked away, carrying the ghosts of his brothers with him.